Ready for a wild ride? Buckle up, because today we're diving into the life of Napoleon Bonaparte.
Ooh, Napoleon. Always a fascinating figure.
Right, but we're not just covering the battles and conquests, so there were plenty of those.
Going deeper, huh?
Exactly. We're using Emil Ludwig's biography as our guide, and let me tell you, it reveals a side of Napoleon you rarely hear about.
I'm intrigued. What kind of surprises does Ludwig unearth?
Well, for starters, forget that image of Napoleon as a kid obsessed with toy soldiers and mock battles.
You mean the whole military genius from the cradle thing?
Yeah, that. Ludwig paints a different picture. He describes young Napoleon as, and I quote, made of granite with a volcano inside.
Intense. That sounds more like a force of nature than a little kid.
Right. And it gets to the heart of who Napoleon was even as a boy. Deep thinker, drawn to stories of greatness. He was fascinated by legacy, by the idea of leaving a mark on the world.
So not just playing soldier, but thinking about what it really meant to lead, to conquer.
Exactly. And there's a story about his brother Joseph, who wanted to ditch his career in the church to join the military.
Really. Bit of a career shift, to say the least.
Totally. So 15-year-old Napoleon writes to Joseph this letter, and it's unbelievably insightful. He basically tells him, dude, terrible idea. You're way better suited for a desk job, trust me.
He actually said that. That's hilarious.
Right. And the thing is, he backs it up. Napoleon points out Joseph's lack of, let's call it battlefield courage, but praises his social skills, his head for politics.
Wow. Even at 15, he had this remarkable ability to read people, to understand their strengths and weaknesses.
It's incredible. And you know what's even more interesting? This analysis, it foreshadows Napoleon's own path. He embodies the very traits he saw lacking in Joseph, the decisiveness, the courage, that inborn leadership.
It's like he was analyzing himself, projecting his own ambitions onto his brother.
It makes you think about how much of who we are is already there from the start, right? These core traits that shape our destiny.
Absolutely. And in Napoleon's case, that ambition, combined with his sharp intellect, it propelled him to power. And speaking of intellect, prepare to be surprised. Napoleon was quite the writer.
Wait, hold on. Napoleon, a writer. I thought we were talking military genius, not literary icon.
History loves to put people in boxes, but Ludwig reveals a more complex picture. He includes excerpts from Napoleon's personal letters, and they're surprisingly insightful and engaging.
Really? Like what?
Well, there's this one passage where Napoleon's describing his observations of the French people after a trip. He notes how much the peasants loved the idea of liberty.
They just wanted to be free from the monarchy.
Exactly. But then he observes that the women, well, they were all about the monarchy. He even compares different political ideologies to attractive women, vying for attention.
That's wild. So he was witty, observant, even a bit flirtatious with his writing.
Precisely. And more importantly, it reveals his keen understanding of public opinion, how to appeal to different segments of society. This wasn't just a guy who could strategize on a battlefield. He understood the power of narrative, of controlling the message.
So this whole writing thing, it wasn't just a hobby for Napoleon. It was a tool, a way to influence and shape his image.
Absolutely. Think of it as early propaganda, but far more elegant than the way we understand the term today. His writing allowed him to spread his ideas, to sway public sentiment.
It's like the original influencer marketing campaign, Napoleonic style. But let's be real, we can't talk about Napoleon without addressing the elephant in the room, or should I say, the ambition in the room.
It's practically synonymous with his name, but it's a double-edged sword, wouldn't you say?
Totally. And Ludwig doesn't shy away from it. There's this chilling passage where Napoleon's own brother, Lucien, predicts he'll become a tyrant if given the chance.
Talk about a bold statement, especially knowing how things ultimately played out.
Right. And then there's that story about Napoleon refusing to share credit for a victory, even a little bit.
He had to be the sole architect of his own success.
Exactly. It's like a tiny glimpse into this relentless drive, this need to be the best, the only one. Do you think that ambition, in the end, was his downfall?
It's a question that continues to fascinate historians and anyone who studies Napoleon. But one thing's for sure. Ambition without balance, without some measure of restraint, can be a dangerous thing. And nowhere is that more evident than in Napoleon's personal life, particularly his tumultuous relationship with Josephine. But we'll dive into that rabbit hole after a quick break.
Napoleon and Josephine talk about a relationship for the ages.
A real power couple, though maybe not in the way we usually think of it.
Right, and Ludwig doesn't hold back on the drama, the infidelity, the passionate reconciliations. It's almost Shakespearean.
It was a tumultuous relationship fueled by intense emotions on both sides.
There's this one detail that really stuck with me about Napoleon ordering all of Josephine's belongings to be removed from their home before she arrived.
Really? Why would he do that?
Well, she'd been unfaithful and he'd even considered divorce. But instead of sending her packing, he takes her back. But he wants to make it clear that he is in control, that she's returning on his terms.
A power move, for sure. So he couldn't erase her betrayal, but he could dictate the terms of their reunion. It speaks volumes about his need for control, a theme that plays out in other aspects of his life, too.
Totally. Like, remember how he brought back Catholicism? And not necessarily out of some deep religious conviction.
More like a strategic move to consolidate his power and appeal to the masses.
Exactly. He even said something like, people need religion, gives them structure, helps them understand their place in the world. He sounded more like a political strategist than a devout believer.
He understood the influence of the church, its hold on the hearts and minds of the people. It was a way to legitimize his rule, to tap into a pre-existing power structure.
It's fascinating how religion and politics have always been intertwined, right? Leaders throughout history using faith to bolster their authority.
It's a tale as old as time, unfortunately. But, for all his calculated moves, Ludwig does reveal these surprisingly human moments in Napoleon's life.
Right, like his soft spot for his stepson, Eugene. He absolutely adored him, treated him like his own.
He saw great potential in Eugene and nurtured his talents. It showed a different side of Napoleon, a more paternal, caring side.
And then there's Napoleon playing hide-and-seek. Ludwig describes him hiding in the gardens at Malmaison, acting like a kid again. Not exactly the image that comes to mind when you think Emperor of France.
It's a good reminder that even the most powerful figures are still human, capable of playfulness, affection, and vulnerability.
It's a good point. But even with those tender moments, family life wasn't always smooth sailing for Napoleon. Ludwig doesn't shy away from the tension that simmered beneath the surface.
There were definitely some power struggles, especially with his siblings.
That scene where he blows up at his brother Joseph for not understanding the sacrifices he's made, the weight of his responsibilities. Intense.
You can sense the isolation in that moment, the burden of leadership. Imagine being surrounded by family, yet feeling utterly alone in your position.
It's a side of power we don't often consider, the loneliness at the top.
Exactly. But it's a humanizing element, reminding us that even emperors have emotions, insecurities, and a deep need for connection.
It's interesting you mention connection because Ludwig talks about Napoleon's fascination with the leading intellectuals of his time, people like Wieland and Goethe.
He was drawn to brilliance. To those who excel in their fields, he saw the power of ideas.
But was it genuine admiration, or was there an element of control, of wanting to align himself with the intellectual elite for his own purposes?
That's a million-dollar question, isn't it? Was there space for true intellectual freedom under Napoleon's rule? Or did even the brightest minds ultimately serve his political agenda?
It's a question that still resonates today, the relationship between power, intellect, and artistic expression.
Absolutely. And Ludwig's account, while not providing definitive answers, certainly gives us a lot to think about.
It does make you wonder if that need for control, in the end, contributed to his downfall. Because as we know, Napoleon's reign didn't last forever.
No empire does. And Ludwig doesn't sugarcoat the role of betrayal in Napoleon's demise.
It's one thing to be defeated on the battlefield, but the betrayal of those he trusted, that cut deep.
Especially Marmont, one of his most trusted generals, switching sides. That was a personal blow, as much as a strategic one.
It's like the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
It makes you wonder about the nature of loyalty, especially in the ruthless game of power.
And Napoleon himself said that the betrayals hurt more than the circumstances of his defeat.
Imagine that, being more wounded by the actions of men he once trusted than by the loss of an empire.
It adds another layer to the tragedy of Napoleon. But as we know, his story doesn't end with his defeat. He's exiled to Saint Helena, this tiny island in the middle of nowhere.
Quite a change of scenery from the palaces of Paris.
Talk about a fall from grace. Ludwig doesn't hold back on the details of his exile either, describing his living conditions as pretty grim.
Grim how?
Well, let's just say the rats were a major problem.
Rats.
An infestation. The emperor reduced to battling rodents in his final days. It's almost tragicomic in a way.
It's a stark reminder of the fleeting nature of power, the way life can take these unexpected turns.
One day you're emperor, The next, you're sharing your exile with an army of rats. But you know what's amazing? Even in exile, facing the stark reality, Napoleon's spirit wasn't completely broken.
He was a survivor, that's for sure. What did he do to fill his days?
He throws himself into dictating his memoirs. Day after day, he recounts his triumphs, his regrets, shaping the narrative of his own life.
Even in defeat, that need for control for shaping his own legacy, it never wavered.
It's almost as if he was determined to have the last word, even from exile.
Exactly. It's a testament to his unwavering self-belief, even when faced with such adversity. And speaking of adversity, Ludwig shares a very telling reflection of Napoleon's from this period.
Oh, what's that?
He basically says that adversity was the missing element in his life.
Wow. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, it's like he's acknowledging that his earlier triumphs, all the victories and conquests, they lacked a certain depth. Like they couldn't truly test his mettle or reveal his true character.
So exile, as difficult as it was, became this unexpected crucible. It forced him to confront his own mortality and really grapple with the meaning of his own life.
Precisely. It stripped away the trappings of power and forced him to confront himself, his legacy. And even facing his own mortality, he never let go of the French Revolution's impact.
Yeah, he even called himself its messiah, which is, well, quite a statement.
A bit grandiose, even for Napoleon. But it speaks to this unshakable belief in his own place in history, his role in shaping the destiny of France.
It's fascinating how his story still captivates us, centuries later. He's this larger-than-life figure, but also a cautionary tale.
Definitely. A reminder that history is rarely straightforward, that even the most brilliant and ambitious figures are full of contradictions.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Ludwig's biography, what do you think is the biggest takeaway?
Well, we've seen Napoleon, the military mastermind, the shrewd politician, the complex and often contradictory individual. But I think the key takeaway is that to truly understand historical figures, we have to go beyond the simplified narratives.
Absolutely. We have to wrestle with their complexities, their flaws, their humanity.
Exactly. It's in those messy, often contradictory details that we discover their true impact and what their stories can teach us about ourselves, about power, about the human condition. And that's what makes history so fascinating, don't you think?
Absolutely. It's been a wild ride exploring the many layers of Napoleon Bonaparte, from the battlefield to the depths of his own character.
A reminder that even emperors are human, after all.
That's a wrap on our deep dive into the life of Napoleon Bonaparte. Until next time, keep those minds curious.